what's the process and further processed markets, and how are they filled? So, Harry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe just go through on the left-hand side of the folders that you were handed out. There's a little card that says Policies, Programs, and Procedures, Online Reporting. As much as possible, we're trying to do everything online. So you're able to actually log on to see your farm's either pullet or layer quota, be able to do your reporting, day-old reporting, 19-week-old reporting, layer order reporting, so that's all online. You can go online and take a look at it. You can't change it. You can't change. It's not like, anybody seen Ferris Bueller? Remember? Ferris Bueller, he had 6 days missing, 7, 5, 4, 3, it's all wiped out. Can't change it, so it's read-only. The next little document is courtesy of Egg Farmers of Canada Supply Management, using those at handouts, fairs, etc., in terms of what supply management is and how it works. There's our annual report is in there from last year for your information. And did we put the business plan in? And the business plan is in there as well for 2014. We're in the process of putting the final touches on the 2015 plan. What happens is the board in the fall sits down, goes through a process to identify the key result areas for the next year, identifies kind of the environment that's out there, identifies some of the challenges and opportunities. Once that's completed and a budget process has been done, we, the staff, sit down and operationalize that business plan. The last piece of information that's in there is called the Egg Experience, a brand new brochure developed by our Public Affairs Department. Again, is going to be very useful at the anytime you're speaking to a service club, to a school, Chamber of Commerce, Royal Winter Fair, Canadian National Exhibition, etc. It's got almost everything you wanted to know about eggs, but we're too afraid to ask in that one document. So before I get into the Ontario process and further processed markets, we've been sitting about an hour. I'm going to suggest you stand up. Break is ready? No, not ready yet. They're not ready till I'll be finished in 10 or 15 minutes. Then we can have break, and then you can go in your check-in room. That's all. Everybody just stand up right now. Do a 7th inning stretch. Turn around and look at someone, say, nice to see you, don't I look good? Glad you could come. All right, now you can have a seat. No, that's all right. We'll get him. We'll get him back. Last one sitting down loses 50 birds. Oh, Mr. Hunter. Ooh. Mr. Miller, he didn't make it down. Okay, there we go. So Ontario processed and further processed market. So let's talk a minute about what a processed product is and what a further processed product is. A further processed product would be something that you would buy like at a Tim Hortons, where you've got their egg sandwich that basically is cooked in a facility in Toronto, fast frozen, and then shipped out to the Tim Hortons. A further processed product would be something you'd buy at Burger King in terms of an egg wrap. So they're literally sheets of scrambled eggs that are rolled up into something. So that's a further processed product. A processed product is basically the egg is broken either as a whole egg, it's broken as the customer, the breaker's customer may want it as a yolk only, may want it as a white only, may want it blended together, may want it as frozen, may want it as powdered. And so it's all of those components that go into the processed and further processed market. And when the system was set up, as you can see here, it was originally called surplus removal, because at the time when the system was set up, the egg processing industry hadn't progressed to where it is today. And so when you think, again, system was set up, basically everybody was almost a producer grader. We had probably 1,000, 1,500 egg farmers, but they graded their own eggs. And so the surplus to your sales ended up sometimes being the small eggs, the medium eggs, etc. So it was really 5 to 10% was a surplus removal. Well, as time moved on, It's now known as processed and further processed market. In Ontario, it accounts for about 23% of all the eggs that are laid, separate from our eggs for processing. So every 100 dozen eggs produced, 23 dozen is going to that processed and further processed market, and the other 77 dozen eggs are going to the table market, or they would go to the hotel, restaurant, institutional trade. In other provinces, on a national basis, is about almost 30%. 25 to 30%. In Manitoba, as an example, that's 50%. 50% of the production in Manitoba goes to one very large breaking facility in Manitoba. And so it becomes very important when we talk a little bit later about how we get paid for the processed product, that they try and stay as much as possible, as close as possible to their producer price and cost of production. Just to go back for a minute, Roger mentioned the board looks at a number of factors when they set the producer price. As he's identified, the retailers don't like us going up and down all the time. So as an example, at the end of 2013, producer price versus our COP, we were about 2.5, 2.8 cents below producer price over COP over the whole year. 2013, last year, we were about 2.5 cents above. So those 2 years just about evened out producer price to cost of production. Year to date, we're running 3/4 of a cent. We'll finish probably a year between 1/2 cent and 3/4 of a cent, equal to producer price and COP. So come January, the board will have to make a decision with respect to producer price, because January and February usually are heavy months that go into the processed market. Whoops, that's the next one. Whoops. Keep going. There we go. So how do we source for the processed and further processed market? Scott was mentioned that really the supply management system in eggs is envied by even the other supply managed commodities. Because if I'm a grader, if I have surplus to my needs, I can sell them back to the system, being Egg Farmers of Ontario, being Egg Farmers of Canada. So let's say I've graded 100 boxes of eggs and they only need 90 boxes a week. They will sell the other 10 boxes back to Egg Farmers of Ontario. We're an agent for Egg Farmers of Canada. Before we sell those to the breakers, we will ask if are there any other grading stations that may need those 10 boxes of eggs. So as much as possible, we minimize the amount that's going to get sold to the breaking market by seeing if there's any table requirements by graders either in Ontario or in Quebec or in Manitoba. And you do that because if we can't supply the market, then a supplemental permit comes in tariff-free. And I think as Scott mentioned already, we'd probably prefer, if we had to, that the breaker market is satisfied more than the table market. Because basically the table market, if we're shorting it, you'll go into the store and right on the carton it says product of USA. It's graded to CFIA standards, but it has to say that on the carton that it's product of the USA. So we'll get calls in the office, particularly at Christmas and Easter. I'm into X and X such and store, and basically why are the eggs coming in from the United States? By the time we explain to them that basically, we can't plug and unplug the chicken in terms of when we need the eggs, that as part of previous trade agreements, we have to allow so much to come in. So we try and minimize that. So basically we buy it back and we sell those eggs to the breaker. And we buy the product back at the lesser of producer price or COP, plus 4 cents. That's what EFC basically says, okay, we think you can handle that whole thing for about 4 cents of administration. We, in turn, if we're buying the eggs from the grading station, we buy the eggs at producer price plus about plus or minus 10 cents plus transportation. That's meant to cover grading, packaging, handling, and transportation. So it's a very nice system in the sense that it's very little downside for the grading stations. We're guaranteeing some supply to a degree to the processors because we need that processing industry in Canada. If not, basically you could probably kiss 20 to 25% production away to other jurisdictions, probably the United States. If you ever go to Costco and see that Jimmy Dean sandwich that comes in, it's probably coming in tariff-free because on a percentage basis, the egg in that is a less percentage of everything that's in there. So hopefully by the end of today, you'll see how All of this plays together in terms of pieces of a puzzle. The 3 pillars of supply management, the importance of exercising some production discipline. In exchange, they've allowed us to have a cost of production formula that we update every 5 years, and they provided some tariff protection. In Canada, there's 8 breaking plants in Ontario. In Canada, there's 8, maybe a little more, but I think I've counted about 8. In Ontario, there's 6 breaking plants. Nationally, approximately, actually that number is a little higher. Nationally, they guarantee a supply of anywhere from 200 to 220,000 15 dozen boxes of eggs each and every week to those breakers. And if the breakers are processors, if they're short, then they're allowed to bring in eggs again under supplemental. Provincially, we provide about 122,000 15 dozen boxes are sent to the breakers. That's a combination of our breaker market as well as our EFP. We probably put in 21,000, 22,000 boxes on a weekly basis to the breaker market. Sorry, provincially the commitment is 122,000. We provide on average about 75% of that. We average anywhere from about 60,000 boxes a week from regular industrial product or processed product declarations, and another 20 or 21,000 boxes coming in. So you can see we're shorting, if you would, the breaker market by 25%. We've shorted the table market a little bit, and so the last allocation increase from Egg Farmers of Canada is meant to close that gap on the table market side. So basically, what are some of the products in the processed and further processed market? Liquid egg in pails, dried egg, and some of the other things that I mentioned. 26% is a value-added segment, so egg patties for breakfast sandwiches, omelets, etc. And 11% for retail, liquid egg cartons, hard-cooked eggs sold in retail at smaller package sizes. So if you go to a Denny's in the province of Ontario and ask for scrambled eggs, they're going to take a carton and pour it out and scramble it up. You go to Queen's Park, the restaurant downstairs will do the same thing. You want scrambled eggs, they'll take it out of the carton, pour it out, and scramble it up. So if you go to Denny's and ask for eggs over, they're going to break that product. So what is eggs for processing? How does it fit into the picture? In order to meet the increased demand by processed and further processed sectors, Eggs for Processing was started in 1999 in order to place the birds where they're actually needed versus a national allocation. That becomes very important. We operate under a national system, and so under previous allocations, even currently under the current quota allocation process, it looks on a national basis as opposed to where are the eggs needed. And we've proven that the eggs, we need basically 21,000 boxes of eggs go to the breakers in Ontario. And so as Roger mentioned, that is basically run on a pooled system. By and large, it basically covers the cost of, I'm going to say, some of your hard costs in terms of the feed and the pullet, and that's about it. But that, and by the same token, that 700,000 birds produces about 1 million boxes of eggs a week, or 1 million boxes of eggs a year, which do not or did not have to be imported into Canada. And so, again, if I tie the whole trade discussion together and tariffs and stuff, the agreement that Egg Farmers of Ontario has with Egg Farmers of Canada is if there's ever a trade agreement and we have to give up market access, we've committed that we will remove basically the eggs for processing birds. And so I tie it back to the layer leasing pool, which we've decided the last few times, basically those birds are going to get leased out. So it's a bit of a hedge or protection that if we ever did lose anything in a trade deal, we might have to remove the leased birds because of the taking out EFP birds, but we wouldn't have to touch your quote-unquote base quota. So all of those things are integrated. So again, it's basically 8.5% of a hen's production, and that the pool allotment is a percentage permitting producers to possess fowl and produce and market eggs from such fowl that's there. So there isn't a dedicated EFP bird. It's 8.5% of each bird's production is counted as EFP. The grading station will pay a bit of an advance on the pool. We'll send out 3 or 4 times a year and try and clear the pool out, so you'll get your get a check related to EFP. If on a per bird levy basis, coming back together, if you haven't there hasn't been enough money submitted on behalf of your birds, we'll do an offset. If you owe me some money and I owe you some money, then basically we'll do an offset and handle it that way. One other thing in terms of when we talk about leviable dozens, in Ontario, other provinces do this. In Ontario, we do not levy cracks because the cracks get counted in as a leviable dozen. Cracks are basically 15 cents a dozen. Levy is 35, 36, 37 cents a dozen. Doesn't make any sense for the grader to pay you 15 cents and we're going to levy you twice the amount. So if you figure cracks are running at 2 or 2.5%, you still need 2 or 2.5% of good eggs to walk through the door to cover those on the levy that we don't have for the cracked eggs, because we in the office have to send the levy off based on as if the cracks were levied. And it also, as I say, it manages to keep jobs here in the province of Ontario. Any questions in terms of eggs for processing, further processed market, etc.?
Maybe just explain, if you don't mind, how the price difference is between eggs for, not our EFP in Ontario, but how the price difference is met for those markets, because breaker eggs are sold to the breakers at a lower price than what you get paid as a producer. So explain to the crowd here how that works.
Basically, nationally, the Egg Farmers of Canada sets the price sold to the breaker based on what they call an earner berry. Earner berry is a price discovery mechanism in the United States. They do not set the price. They simply report on price that's traded between egg grading stations in the United States. The price is set at the earner berry price because in theory that's what if those companies moved to the United States and had to buy breaker eggs, that's in theory what they would have to pay for those breaker eggs. And so when we talk about the levy, and basically there's money in the levy to cover the gap between the table price and the breaker price. Breaker price right now is running on a spot market, Mr. Hunter, 80 cents, 85 cents a dozen. I think that's the number. So do the math. Let's say it's 90 cents a dozen right now. 90, let's say it's 90. So let's say it's 90. You know your producer price for your large is basically $1.90. Take off 30 cents or 40 cents for levy, so you're now down to $1.60 or $1.50. So the difference between 90 cents and $1.50 is made up on the levy on all eggs, when only 25% of the eggs are being sold to the breaker at that breaker price. And we do that in order to maintain the jobs in Ontario and Canada. And that becomes important when you have discussions for people that are attacking supply management, because when you look at, and even sometimes the livestock industry, you look at the fruit and vegetable industry, all the processing plants I know in Ontario have basically shut down. You look at Heinz, that was going to move, it didn't. You look at, used to be Canadian Canners in the Niagara Peninsula. You look at E.D. Smith, that used to be in Winona. So the fact that we have a thriving processing and further processing industry in Canada is another feather in our cap for fair farm pricing, because it keeps processing jobs in the province of Ontario. That covered off, or did I miss something?
Well, I think it's maybe just important, I feel, that the participants in the room today recognize that the levy is fully recoverable as producers. That is consumer money that is being used to supplement that pricing. So you as producers, when you take a look at it and you're looking at, well, I paid this much in levy. Well, that levy is fully recoverable to you in the COP. It's not our money as producers, it's consumer money. And so that's where we have to be very careful when we're going forward with quota allocation increases and asks. We also, because we're going to be producing more eggs and there's more volume and more levy coming in, we are also asking for a levy reduction. So that way the levy will go down a little bit and be adjusted. So that's not producer money, it's consumer money.
Good. The last two increases in this one coming out, Egg Farmers of Canada have attached a $5.80 per bird levy that goes strictly right to the pooled income fund, which is the money that's used to cover the difference between table price and the breaker price. And so that's That's there, as Roger said, basically it's the levies in the COP, which ends up being in the producer price that the board takes a look at. The other factor we take a look at is we try and price, there's, I'm going to say, 3 different pricing areas. There's everything kind of Manitoba West, they still price off of us. There's Ontario and Quebec, and then there's the Maritimes, which still prices off of Ontario and Quebec. So we try and make sure we're in sync as much as possible, both in terms of the producer price and any changes to the producer price. Any questions?
Maybe just mention, Harry, about the pooled income fund, that if they hear that, that's how.
Yeah, the pooled, if you hear the term pooled income fund, particularly from Egg Farmers of Canada, that's the money that they need to cover that difference between the table price that the producers get and the breaker price that we sell those eggs to. And so if we've seen years, when I first started, we saw basically that the pooled income fund was in a negative situation and all the provinces had to sign a letter of credit guaranteeing operations for Egg Farmers of Canada. You're talking at least a couple $100 million, if not $250 million business on the breaker side in terms of all the eggs that we buy and sell. So they try and make sure they're running a reserve of between $20 and $40 million just to cushion that, because things can change overnight. Traditionally in the United States, before Christmas and before Easter, the Urner Berry price will go up. That's just based on the volume of eggs that are available. The other thing that's driving the increased price in the United States right now is, some of you may remember in the last couple of years, there was a large avian influenza outbreak in Mexico. Basically, they lost about 40 million birds. They're trying to repopulate 40 million birds. And you can imagine the challenges doing that in terms of you don't want all the birds to come in at once. In fact, they were having some challenges with biosecurity to the point where some of the birds were going back in, but they were only producing at 75 or 80%. Cesar, who is from Mexico, we hope to maybe get him up here for our 50th annual meeting, but he was thinking about, one of their options, and they don't have supply management, they don't have fair farm pricing. One of their options is we'll just shut this whole area down, move it to someplace else, but they're going to build super biosecurity buildings, and then maybe in 4 or 5 years really come into the marketplace. So right now, if the Urner Berry price is low enough, all the eggs are going to the States. When the Mexicans can't afford them, they end up selling them to us. Plus, in the United States, they're experiencing what we're experiencing as well, is anywhere from a 3 to a 4% growth because of protein. They know consumers are starting to realize that eggs are a good source of protein compared to, if you would, the white meat, which would be pork, and the beef. I saw that a report from the United States this morning. This is the lowest inventory of cattle since 1951 in the United States. And so people are going to put a whole bunch of beef in. It's going to take a little bit of time to do that, but they're also going to want to export because they want to the United States will want to maintain its export markets as opposed to giving it over to Brazil or someplace like that. So all of this is interconnected, but in the meantime, we need to be protecting our market share, and this is what we're attempting to do that with our allocations and getting them in as soon as possible. There is, and I fully understand, particularly a lot of those individuals that sit around the EFC table were there in the 70s when that 33% reduction had to be done in a 6-month period, and it hurt. And nobody really wants to get into that situation again. If we were to ever see a layer reduction, we would hope that it would take place over a natural cycle of a flock where we don't have to go out and kill the birds immediately. There's a couple things on here before I let you go for the break that we haven't talked about, and we're going to talk about if some of you are going to be here tomorrow for the counselor's workshop. Animal care is a big issue in consumers' mind. Last fall, we had a W5 expose on a farm in Alberta. And I think some of you may have heard Roger say that could have been on any farm in Ontario and Canada. That was a well-run farm. They spent 6-7 months undercover for about 30 seconds, 2 minutes maybe worth of video or whatever. Having said that, so the attack really wasn't, part of it was an attack on how we produce eggs, but more it was an attack on McDonald's. And they didn't buy any eggs. There was no eggs went from McDonald's to that from that farm, but McDonald's still had to put out a statement that we don't buy eggs from there. That was followed up, if you remember, by a dairy expose by W5. And again, Saputo Dairies had to basically say, we don't buy milk from those. So it's basically an attack on the brands, and the brands will do anything they feel necessary to protect their brand. So in meeting with the retailers, Eggs Farmers of Canada and our graders and processors said, look, the retailers and the people we sell our eggs to understand that you have an animal care program. The big challenge is that it's not third-party audited. Right now, Egg Farmers of Canada performs that audit. And so probably by summer of next year, maybe the latest, we in Ontario will have third-party, first of all, they're working right across Canada to have third-party audits. So in Ontario, we'll be responsible for implementing the third-party audits. I've met with Guelph Food Technology Center. There's a couple other companies I have to meet with. So basically, the animal care program, this is the audit. We're going to do some training with the auditors. They'll know what they're talking about before they come into the barns. The second thing was that the retailers are basically saying, we want to know when somebody fails. Okay, and a failure, I'm going to say a difference between a major failure and a minor failure. But before the farm is branded as a failure, there's 3 corrective actions. In other words, somebody will come to the farm, there'll be an auditor to come to the farm and identify that there's something missing or there's something wrong, so that you got 30 days to correct it. They'll come back 30 days later. Is it corrected? Yes, boom, you move on. If it's not corrected, then you got another 30 days. So after the 90th day, if it's not corrected, what the retailers have said, we want to know, if asked, which farms failed. Again, not necessarily saying that the eggs aren't any good, but why did it fail? So there's some transparency. And they do all of this in order to say to the activists or anybody that asks, look, Egg Farmers of Canada has an animal care program that's third-party audited. We become aware of anybody that fails. And again, that becomes very important. So tomorrow, again, we're going to talk about what's called egg quality assurance or camera-ready barns. Our goal, as I think the board's goal, would be to have somebody to break into your barn and walk away because there's nothing there to see. That's the ultimate goal in doing this. And so that's going to get announced tomorrow. So there's 6, if you haven't seen it, there's 6 elements that have been added to the animal care program. Element number 1 is a signature by you as the owner that you agree to abide by the animal care program and that you will pass it. The second one is signed by your employees or your family members that say you understand the animal care program. If you see any abuse in the barn, that it's not tolerated, that it's reported right away. The third one is your visitor policy that basically says the same thing. For a good farm that's operating, it's not going to be anything that's onerous. The next 3 are ones that are being introduced in January. One talks about what goes on, what do you do daily in the barn? That's being moved from the HACCP program to the animal care program. Again, it's just documenting to prove what you do. The second one is a euthanasian policy. And so that we're working with the Poultry Industry Council and the other feather boards to develop euthanasian training that hopefully will take place from January, probably not till April, May, or June, or even into the fall. Because with basically 1,600 farms to do between layers and broilers and broiler breeders and turkeys, it's a lot of training that's going to have to be done. And the last one is when your people come in to move those birds, they're going to have to sign a piece of paper saying that they've had an element of training in terms of the proper way to take the birds out of the cage, that kind of stuff. All of this is just due diligence. And is it more paperwork? Yes. But is it going to make our industry better? Yes. So as you start to hear that, as the field staff come around and start doing some of that, that's what it's all about. It's basically having consumers, you're going to hear a little later, maybe not today, but tomorrow in terms of public affairs. We do all of this to ensure that the consumer has complete confidence in the eggs that you produce. We don't want them thinking at the grocery shelf, well, is this egg produced ethically? We want them to have full confidence in you as an egg farmer that, in fact, the job is being done. So the other thing that's get laid over this, we have the egg trailer, we have everything that's going on at the fall fairs. It's all intertwined, so it all presents a picture of allowing consumers to have full confidence in the product that's a high-quality product being produced at an ethical and a fair price to the consumers. So, any questions? Okay, Jennifer tells me we're ready for the break. We're going to break now and probably come back at 3:30. And I'll give you a chance, if you haven't